Just a moment. I forgot to hit live.
Oh,
Your mics work. Okay, Commission Chair Twait,
here.
Commissioner Springer,
Here.
Commissioner Halstead,
Here.
Commissioner McIntyre,
Here.
Vice Chair Fikes,
Here.
Commissioner Askin,
Here.
Commissioner Greenberg,
Here.
Chairman Twait, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Item A3, agenda approval.
I move
Mr.
we
Halstead.
approve the agenda as written.
I'll second.
Second. It's been motion to approve and seconded. Any objection? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Item A4, consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any objections? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. Item C, scheduled public comment. We have none. Item D, unscheduled public comment. Anyone wishing to speak to an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to item E, consideration of plats. We have none. Takes us to item F, public hearings. F1 is resolution PZ 2019-37. It's an application for a conditional use permit to operate a gunsmithing business located at 310 Princess Street, Kenai, Alaska 99611, and further described as Lot 2 Cinderella subdivision. The application was submitted by Ron Carlson, 310 Princess Street, Kenai 99611. Can we get a motion, please? Commissioner Askin.
I move that we approve resolution PZ 2019-37 application for gunsmithing business conditional use permit.
All right, a second. Commissioner Green, no, Commissioner Springer.
I second that.
All right, staff report.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Twait. The staff report is on page 7 for this agenda item, and then there are a couple photos I took at a site visit that are on page 23 that just show what the garage looks like that's being proposed for the gunsmithing business. And then the page before on 22 has a site plan that might be helpful to look at while I'm reviewing the staff report. And there's also a couple maps then on page 20 and page 21. So the city has received an application for a conditional use permit for a gunsmithing business at 310 Princess Street, which is within the Rural Residential 1 or RR1 zone of the city. And gunsmithing in that zone is a conditional use. And the applicant is proposing to use his approximately 294 square foot detached garage for his gunsmithing business. And then he would still reside in the house that's on the property. So in my staff report, I went over the criteria for conditional use permits. So the first one is that the use is consistent with the purpose and intent of the zoning district. So I went over the R1, the intent is for low density residential development and to prohibit uses that would violate the residential character of the environment or generate heavy traffic. So I wrote how the business use of gunsmithing would be secondary or incidental to the residential use of the main building. And I actually wrote that it's similar in character in this case to a home occupation, but the use is still conditionally allowed in the zone, so he still needs a conditional use permit. But the applicant did not expect having many customers or very often for his business, so it would just be every now and then there would be a car in the driveway, and there is room in the driveway to park some additional cars. And I just wrote that business would be conducted in the existing garage. Later in the staff report, I go over a few conditions for the garage to ensure safety, but it wouldn't require a new structure to be built. The second criteria is that the value of the adjoining property in the neighborhood would not be significantly impaired. So there's a church on the corner of Princess Street and the Kenai Spur Highway. So access is from the Kenai Spur to Princess. So the church already generates some traffic. And then Princess Street, it dead ends. You can still go to the right, but there, my rationale was there. I didn't think the traffic proposed by this use would be readily apparent to the average person. There's already this church there that does generate some traffic when there's assemblies at the church. So I wrote that criteria was met. Condition 3 is that the proposed use is in harmony with the comprehensive plan. So I wrote it's in line with goal 2 for economic development and goal 3 for land use. I wrote the applicant will be able to start his small business in Kenai with a low upfront cost while still maintaining the residential character and quality of life in his neighborhood. The 4th criteria is that public services and facilities are adequate to serve the proposed use. This property is connected to city water and sewer, and access is from the Spur Highway and then via Princess Street, which are both, well, Princess Street is maintained by the city and then the Spur Highway is maintained by the state. 5th criteria is that the proposed use will not be harmful to public safety, health, or welfare. And my analysis here was the rationale for some of the conditions of the permit, or proposed for the permit. The applicant still needs to finalize getting his license from the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and I wrote that the city would want to have a copy of that on file. And in the photo, you can see there is an existing fence, and there's a door leading to the garage. So you can't currently access the garage via a door from the front, but the applicant wrote that he knows he would need to install some more heavy-duty locks and make some upgrades to his fence in order to meet federal requirements, and also have a couple security cameras. And I did also contact the fire marshal, and he wrote that he wanted to have his inspection after the Planning and Zoning Commission approved the use of the property for the gunsmithing business, but I wrote that in as a condition. The 6 criteria are the conditions, and so I'm recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve the issuance of this conditional use permit for a gunsmithing business, subject to the following conditions, and there's 10. So 1, the applicant must comply with all federal, state of Alaska, and local regulations. 2, he files an annual report. 3, as requested, he would meet with city staff for inspections. 4, if there's a change of use, it would require a new conditional use permit. 5, the permit would expire if the use is interrupted for a period of at least 1 year. And then 6, it starts getting a little more specific to this permit with the conditions. So 6 is that the applicant would submit a copy of his federal license to the city. 7, the applicant would schedule an appointment with the fire marshal and provide documentation that he met his city fire inspection, and then would have biannual fire inspections by the city fire marshal after the initial one. 8 is that the applicant upgrades his security, so with security cameras and door locks and the fencing. 9, that if a sign is put up, he would obtain a sign permit first. And then 10 is just that failure to meet these conditions or provide documentations before the business is open is grounds to suspend the permit. And that is the end of my staff report.
All right, at this time, we will open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to come forward and speak to PZ 2019-37? You are the applicant?
I am, yeah.
Why don't you come on up just in case somebody's got a question or two for you?
Answer a few questions.
You bet.
The access on the buildings, I've already started on that. I've changed the fence arrangement and put in an extra gate to isolate the entry door. And
Let me get you just before you start, so you can state your name and address for the record, just so we got that.
yeah, Ron Carlson, 310 Princess Street.
All right. Okay, yeah, carry on if you have anything else. Yeah, so, anyone have any questions? I might have marched you up here for no reason. Oh, Commissioner McIntyre.
The only question I have, and I think we've discussed this maybe at a previous meeting, although either that or I'm experiencing deja vu. And that is, so since it's a gunsmithing operation, where do you intend to test fire your weapons when when you've got them worked?
Down at the gun club where everybody else shoots.
Okay.
You know, I realize, I mean, I'm in the city limits and, you know, there's gonna be no discharge of firearms at all.
On the premises?
Right, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm gonna have to stay within, you know, all the city ordinances and that kind of stuff. No, I wouldn't even consider
Okay.
doing stuff like that there.
Anyone else? All right, well, that was relatively painless. All right, we appreciate it. Thanks. Anyone else wishing to testify to PZ 2019-37? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission for discussion. Any discussion? Commissioner Halsted.
Question for Ms. Appleby. Number 8 here, you say that the applicant will install all these measures as required by the Federal Bureau of Tobacco and Firearms, ATF. What is that ruling or what is that requirement?
I suppose the specific federal requirements, yeah.
Somewhat, just having kind of researched the situation. Basically,
Can I get you to come back up again just so we can record it easier that way? It's Commissioner Halsted's fault. He should have asked that when you were up here. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, the way I understand it, I've looked at the application page, and there's several levels, I guess, if you will, of the federal license, depending on, you know, what you're up to, depending on, you know, just a small one guy shop or a, you know, production facility. But as far as the security requirements and that, from what I understand is after you apply for your a permit, then at some point there'll be an agent to come by and inspect the premises and look everything over. And it sounds like it's up to the ATF agent, you know, when he looks at that particular site to say, okay, well, you need to have this or you need to have that, and then so I'll, you know, comply with whatever it is they decide that they require to you know, get the federal license in place. So as far as I'm sure they have a list of criteria that have to be met, but as far as what they, you know, exactly they would have me do on my particular property, I think it sounds like it's up to the agent that comes to do the inspection.
Any follow-up?
That was similar to what I'm as a license holder myself. Their requirements. It was humorous to me because he said, "I don't really care if you store them in a tent in your front lawn, as long as the serial numbers match your book when I show up." So, I was curious if they had changed that particular rule.
Yeah,
So,
I guess it may depend, you know, from the agent, but just personally, I'm gonna reinforce the doors. There is a garage door, you know, on the front of the garage, and I'm putting a block in the header above the door, so it flat can't be opened from the outside. And then, of course, there's 2 windows which will be barred, and I'm gonna put a couple of cameras up between the house and the shop and whatnot, and reinforce the locks, all that sort of stuff that I'm actually in the process of now, just trying to get ready. Hopefully I won't have to jump through too many hoops with them, trying to get ahead of the game, I guess, if you will. But I don't see any major hurdles with the federal part of it.
So, in addition to that, I'm curious now. So you have the building security. Are you required to keep them in a gun safe inside of there too then, or can they just be sitting in the tent on the ground?
Speculating somewhat, just on, going with, things that other people have talked to, but I think it just depends on how secure the building itself is. If the building is not secure, then they may require a safe, otherwise you basically make the building.
A safe, sure, yeah, okay.
Which is much better for me, because it's difficult to have a box full of parts that belong to somebody, stack it in a safe every.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, anything else while we got him up here again? All right, thank you. All right, any other discussion?
Chairman Twitty?
Mr. Springer?
Yes, I have a procedure question. Do we need to amend the motion to include staff recommendations?
If I think we went through this, that if the resolution itself includes the staff recommendation, so as long as we're doing that, we're good.
Okay. That's all.
All right, anything else? All right, seeing nothing else, let's call the roll, please.
Commission Chair Tweet,
Yes.
Commissioner Springer,
Yes.
Commissioner Halsted,
Yes.
Commissioner McIntyre,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fikes,
Yes.
Commissioner Askin,
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. That's not a 15-day appeal period, is it?
Yes.
It is. It would be a 15-day appeal period. Okay, so an affected party can file that within 15 days at the city. If there isn't one at that point, then your permit will be granted. So, all right, moving on to item F2, Resolution PZ 2019-33, recommending the Kenai City Council amend Kenai Municipal Code 14.20.175, adult businesses to increase the buffer distance between adult businesses and sensitive use from 500 feet to 1,000 feet, and define sensitive uses and amend Kenai Municipal Code 14.22.010, the land use table, to add adult businesses. Can I get a motion, please?
Chairman
Commissioner
Twitty?
Springer.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution PZ 2019-33.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded. Staff report.
Thank you, Chair Twait. So this comes before the Planning and Zoning Commission. City Council is considering passing ordinance number 3083-2019 substitute, and they've asked the Planning and Zoning Commission for a recommendation on that ordinance. So this would amend Kenai Municipal Code for adult businesses, and it would increase the buffer distance requirement between adult uses and sensitive uses from 500 feet to 1,000 feet. It would also define sensitive uses. Currently, code requires an adult business be 500 feet from a church or a school, and this code change would define a sensitive use, and then adult businesses would be required to be 1,000 feet from sensitive uses. And then just as a clarification, really, then this ordinance would also add adult businesses to the land use table. And my staff report that I'll review is on page 26. There's a map on page 50 where I tried to show just give some sort of geographic representation of how what the current requirements are and what changes this ordinance could potentially spur. So in my staff report, I go over the definition of a sensitive use would include a church, school, or other area where youth are likely to be present, and then it does limit. The proposed ordinance does limit that further. Let's see, where is it? I believe it was like playgrounds, schools. Where are we? Should have probably marked that. Studies, buffer distance, narrowly tailored. Okay, here it is. Sensitive use would mean church or other place of worship, public or private school, meaning a licensed pre-K through 12th grade, or businesses where or areas where youth are likely to be present, limited to public parks, youth recreational centers, public playgrounds, and public libraries. And there's several attachments. There were some memorandums included with around this ordinance. One from the city attorney, one from Councilmember Petty, describing how the ordinance would meet the goals of the comprehensive plan. The one from the city attorney described proposed code changes and some pertinent legal precedents. And then there's a memorandum from council members Petty and Nackstedt that describe the request to add adult businesses to the land use table. The city council conducted an evidence-based analysis of restrictions on adult businesses, and the city attorney provided studies, and those are also provided to the Planning and Zoning Commission. It was the packet with the green cover, and there are also links to the studies and the meeting for the Planning and Zoning Commission to look at again. So there's documentation from other communities that the negative secondary effects of adult businesses often extend to 1,000 or even to 1,500 feet beyond the business. So there's some support for increasing the buffer distance from those studies. And the idea here is that the city wants to combat the negative secondary effects. So if they increase the buffer, then it would allow them to do that more effectively. I wrote in here how I thought this ordinance met some goals in the comprehensive plan. So I pointed to the goal for quality of life and for land use. And then I also mentioned the goal for economic development because currently there are some areas where an adult business could be located in areas that are prominent for tourism, so I wrote that it would also meet that goal. The changes would still leave over 5% of the land in Kenai open to adult businesses, and that's important because there is some federal case law that sort of identifies that as a benchmark of how much land in the city to leave open for adult businesses. And I wrote in my rationale that the areas left open are part of the real estate market in the city of Kenai, and they are still reasonable locations where an adult business could choose to locate. So I'm recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission adopt Resolution PZ 2019-33 that would recommend the City Council enact ordinance number 3083 2019 substitute as it's written. And I think most of the whereases covered what I had described in my staff report. And mostly I just wanted to restate that it's the rationale is to combat the negative secondary effects of adult businesses. And that the proposed ordinance is narrowly tailored to address the substantial government interest in regulating those secondary effects of adult businesses while still providing available parcels that are part of the real estate market within the city of Kenai where adult businesses may locate. So I recommend the Planning and Zoning Commission pass this resolution and that it be forwarded to the Kenai City Council. And also note that our city attorney is in the audience who can answer some questions if the commission has them. End of staff report.
All right, thank you. At this time, we will open it up for public testimony. Anyone wishing to testify to PZ 2019-33? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Any discussion? Commissioner McIntyre.
Yes, I have just a couple of points of clarification. on page 50 that contains your map, required zone locations for adult businesses. So if I'm reading this correctly, then I understand the zones allowing, those are all clearly marked. And then the purple is the current ordinance where restrictions would be, and the, I guess you call it light green, light yellow, is where the new ordinance would expand to, correct?
Ms. Appleby?
Yes, that is correct. So the light purple circles on the map, and I did merge the circles, so I created them. They're an individual buffer around the list of sensitive uses that I pulled from the parcels, and I merged those. So that's why there's just so there's not a bunch of individual circles. So just heads up, that's how I created it. But yes, so the purple shows the 500-foot buffer from those sensitive uses, and then the green shows the extension to 1,000 feet, if that makes sense.
Right. And so just my point of clarification is that since the change in the zoning would restrict those businesses to these specific areas, general, or what, central commercial, general, heavy industrial, light industrial, actually all of those residential, this doesn't say that, you're not implying that all of those residential areas would be open to possible adult businesses with a conditional use permit.
No, so the circles is where sorry. The circles are where the adult businesses would need to stay out with the buffer distance, and then the only zones I put are where they're currently allowed. And the adult business that would actually not be required to obtain a conditional use permit if they met the buffer requirements, and then there's the existing code that states some building design requirements that an applicant for a building permit would need to meet, but there wouldn't be a conditional use permit. It would just be a principally permitted use if they met these buffer requirements and other ones in these 4 zones, and then not allowed in other zones of the city.
Okay, and so if I'm reading the map right, even though you didn't mark those residential areas, they're not allowed there.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, that is current code, and that would stay the same. The zones wouldn't change. Yeah, that's correct.
My other question is, what's the process if, for example, a couple of ways I want to say this. If somebody decides they want to put it in a daycare, and and it's in an area here, and an adult business is nearby, is it a first come, first served basis? Or, I mean, if the adult business is there, nope, you can't do the daycare there? Or is it, no, you can have your daycare, and now the adult business has to close shop because they're within that buffer? How does that work?
That might be a good question for the city attorney.
Thank you, Chairman Twait. So I can answer that. So if there's an adult business there, the adult business and a school or another sensitive use wanted to move in a church within that buffer zone, it's up to that school, church, or whatever other sensitive use to decide whether or not they want to be that close to the adult entertainment business. The adult entertainment business can stay, and the church or whatever else can locate there. It's just, it's only a one-way buffer. It's not a two-way buffer. But once the business is there, it's established and it doesn't have to move.
Thank you. Good question. Commissioner Greenberg?
I'm just curious, how did you generate the list? It came from, it was based on data?
Ms. Appleby?
Yeah, so I looked at the list of parcels, and then there's the column, I think it's called, yeah, so I used the land use category. And I sorted by that, and then I could see I think there was one, there's something that was institutional, and so that's how I pulled, I think that's how I pulled the churches and the schools, and then I individually selected the library and the recreation center, and a few parks where I knew there were playgrounds. And it's, again, with the caveat, not meant to be, like it would be something that would need to be checked on an individual basis. And I purposefully made the map too, where I didn't want to zoom in really close. Like there's an example here, but I didn't want to make it misleading that it was totally comprehensive of every single sensitive use in the city, if that makes sense. But I still feel it provides a pretty good idea of the uses from that methodology.
Right, but generally, this is not, you're not gonna hold to these particular boundaries. When somebody comes and says, I wanna do a, an adult business, you're gonna have to look at each individual parcel around it. So this is more just an
Yes.
idea of what it
Yes.
looks like. Okay,
Yeah,
good,
that
'cause-
is correct, because it's going to change over time too. Like if someone comes 5 years later, it could be different. And yes, it's something that would have to be checked each time someone comes in.
Good, so, okay, great.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Commissioner McIntyre?
So to follow up on Commissioner Greenberg's question in a way, so, and I thought I saw this in here somewhere, but it's not coming to mind real quick, is that, so when you measure, say you've got a business, an adult business, or you want to put one in, do you measure from the building? Do you measure from the corner of the lot? Do you measure from, where do you measure from? The center of the lot? How do you decide, okay, there's 1,000 feet? I know I'm splitting hairs, but it just interests me.
I think it's a good question with some of the marijuana ones that have been very close, so that's good question, so. Ms. Appleby?
We have there's an existing script that we use each time. It's just there's a buffer tool in the GIS software, and there are different ways you can buffer. So I believe the one we use is just from the parcel going out. If it's close though, then you can take on the aerial imagery, you can hand draw a line if it's really close. And then like the marijuana one, for instance, that one, there actually ended up being a surveyor who went out and measured. So I suppose in general, it's just from the property boundary, but if it's close, then we measure from the building. If it's too close to tell from the property boundary.
Mr. Bloom?
Thank you. So I'll just add
Yeah.
that the code says that the distance specified in this section, which would be 1,000 feet, shall be measured in a straight line without regard to intervening structures from the nearest point of the premises in which the proposed adult business is to be established to the nearest property line of the use listed above.
Kind of a follow-up to that, is that what the city is proposing, or is that kind of an industry standard? Is it something that's gonna be contested because, well, over here they do it this way typically, or is it?
I think it's a fair way. There are other ways that do it this way, I think is the less susceptible to argument. Other places have measured it by pedestrian access or walkways, but that can lead to problems because at least with the marijuana industry, other places that used to do it based on pedestrian access, they would kind of do a maze that the pedestrians had to walk down to extend the distance.
Sure.
So this way is pretty straightforward. It's similar to how we buffer from marijuana stores. You know, one big difference between this and marijuana, I mean, it's a good comparable for certain aspects of it, but this is a constitutionally protected activity, whereas the retail or the commercialization of marijuana is not constitutionally protected. And the city certainly has been given more rights with the proposition that was passed in the subsequent state laws and regulations with regard to regulation of marijuana than we have with adult entertainment.
Thank you again. Anyone else? Commissioner Springer?
Yeah, I just would like to reiterate or restate that the adult businesses would be located in 4 commercial zones, or permitted per this ordinance, but not allowed in any of the other zones. And I'm reading them as central commercial, general commercial, light industrial, and heavy industrial. Is that correct then?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Mr. Bloom?
If I may, just for the commission's information, this doesn't prohibit, like the Main Street Tap and Grill, from having a Chippendale show or any other establishment in the city from having, you know, whether it's a wet T-shirt contest or something else. Because we're only allowed to regulate based on the secondary effects certainly from, you know, a one-time show or an occasional show are not the same as having a full-time establishment. And so there's case law that says that a business that has, you know, a show once or twice a year that has adult entertainment is not a business that features adult entertainment. So they're still allowed to do that, and we as a city can't regulate that the same as we can regulate full-time establishments. So if this were to pass and you were to see, you know, a local business advertising for a one-time event or a weekend event, they would still be in compliance with our ordinance because we wouldn't consider them to be an adult entertainment business.
Commissioner Greenberg?
What if they did like a wet T-shirt Wednesday, every Wednesday? Is that not gonna work?
I guess we would have to look at whether the secondary effects of a wet T-shirt Wednesday are the same as a full-time show, because that's all we can regulate is the secondary effects. And while we don't, as a city, have personal experience, all we can rely on, and the courts allow us to rely on, is studies from other areas. So we'd have to investigate that further, maybe based on studies from other areas, and then based on our own experience to see whether, you know, businesses are moving out of the area or whether it's having a negative impact on other aspects of our community.
Just kind of wonder where the line is between the one time and just a couple times, or how many times is it?
And I've found case law that, you know, suggests we can't do it. It doesn't provide a firm line. There's, you know, movie theaters occasionally have shown an X-rated movie, and, you know, the court said, hey, doing that once or twice a year doesn't make this an adult business establishment. But there's no fine line, black and white, that I can find.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Seeing none, will please call the roll.
Commissioner Springer?
Yes.
Commissioner Halsted?
Yes.
Commissioner McIntyre?
Yes.
Vice Chair Fikes?
Yes.
Commissioner Askin?
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg?
Yes.
Commission Chair Tweet?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, we'll move on to item G, unfinished business. We have none. Item H is new business. We have one item, Resolution PZ 2019-39. It is an application for a home occupation permit for a home daycare of no more than 8 children under the age of 12, located at 604 Laurel Drive, Kenai 99611, and further described as Lot 1, Block J, Woodland Subdivision, Part 1. Application was submitted by Mindy Dalebout, 604 Laurel Drive, Kenai, 99611. Can I get a motion, please? Commissioner Springer, thank you.
To make a motion to approve Resolution PZ 2019-39.
All right, second?
I'll second.
All right, staff report, please.
Thank you, Chair Tweet. So this, the city received an application for a home occupation permit for a daycare. The staff report for this one starts on page 51. And there's some maps and a site plan of the home layout. Probably the most useful one I found when reviewing this one was the page 62. it shows the second floor, and it shows the layout of the area that's being proposed for the daycare. And then also the aerial maps that just show where the neighborhood is. So home, city code for home occupation, I reviewed that in my staff report, and so there are some development requirements for a home occupation, and so there are three. So the first is that not more than one person outside of the family is employed in the home occupation, and that requirement is met. The applicant says that she will be the sole employee with no plans to employ other individuals at this time. And I'll also note too the 8 children. It's up to 8 children. That it's just because we commented that it might be a lot for one person to have 8. This would just allow her to it's not saying she will have 8 children is what I'm going to say at one point in time, or all at once. Anyway, so condition 1 is met for the development requirements for a home occupation. And then the second one is that no more than 30% of the floor area of the home is used for the home occupation. So in this case, she's using 24% of her home, and so that development requirement is met. And then the third is that the home occupation is carried on wholly within the principal building, and that is the case for the daycare. I noted some other requirements for home occupations for fire code. So in this case, the fire marshal has been on the premises and made some recommendations. And so he noted the windows need to open wider in order to be considered egress windows. And the applicant has ordered those windows and then just needs to follow through to install them and possibly get a building permit if the if the windows are bigger than the existing frame and that they would need that in order to install the windows. But we did get word that they have already gone ahead and ordered the type of window that they would need. So I'm recommending approval of the home occupation with 8 conditions. The first is the applicant complies with all federal, state of Alaska, and local regulations. 2, the fire marshal performs an inspection to verify that the applicant complies with the requirements that he set forth on his initial inspection. 3, the applicant, if necessary, gets a building permit to install those windows. 4, the premises are inspected biannually or every other year by the fire marshal after the initial inspection. 5, the state license is submitted to the city, so we have a copy on file. 6 notes that this permit is not transferable to another person or location. Those just aren't allowed for home occupation permits at all. 7, if a sign would go up, that the applicant would at first obtain a sign permit. And then just a similar note as the conditional use permit, that if the applicant does not follow through to meet these conditions before they open and provide documentation to the city that they have met these, that it's grounds for revoking the issuance of the home occupation permit. And that's the end of my staff report.
All right, thank you. We have it before us. Any discussion? Commissioner Springer.
I have a question for staff. I want to try to say this delicately. The fire marshal provided this inspection that indicates windows need to be installed then, replaced? Okay. Okay, I'm gonna say it anyway. I can't help it. I'm curious as to why the building official wasn't involved in this particular inspection. Because I gotta say it.
In a previous life.
I'd like to know what code he's referring to, because as far as I can tell, that's an incorrect assessment of code requirements. So that's my my point of view. I have no problem in what he's asking for. It's over and above what the minimum requirement is. So, but I was just curious about that. So, and I had to throw my 2 cents worth and couldn't help myself.
I think he got 5 cents.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll answer as best I can. I honestly don't know all the ins and outs of the fire code, so we pretty much defer to what the fire marshal says. And well, on all of these, where there's some sort of health and safety inspection, it's always the fire marshal we have go do them. The reason I mentioned the building inspector on this one is because we weren't sure from both in our discussions with the applicant and with the fire marshal what sort of work would be necessary to install the windows. So we wanted the applicant to just make sure they knew that if, they're going to be knocking out a wall or something, that they need a building permit. Yeah. And I don't know too if perhaps maybe this isn't just the fire code. Like I don't know if there's special requirements for daycares as far as ingress and egress that maybe are different from what the fire code is. That is why this is being required.
Well, that was why I was asking, because I was thinking, well, maybe there's something that I'm not aware of that he has in his repertoire that I don't know about. So.
Yeah, and maybe it's you need two exit points. Could be the requirement, because I'm not to expand too much on it, but perhaps that's it. Because on the site plan, so this is on the second floor, so the only way out would be the stairway, and so I think it's because you need some sort of alternate way out. And actually, my mother ran a daycare in a floor of my home when I was growing up, and I was remembering the layout of that. And you could get out either by going upstairs, or you could get out by going through a door that would lead to the garage and then out. And so that probably met the requirement. So I'm guessing the windows here are key, because the only way out is through the stairway. So if that was blocked, there needs to be another way to get out.
Now you got my curiosity. So, and again, maybe just a discussion item, but so the windows in the bedrooms there, I assume, are egress windows. It's going to be this family room area that's probably not an egress situation that is the requirement to be egress. So it should be one window, I would think. Okay. All right. And this, from what I can read, is the daycare areas in the lower half of this house in this split entry looking situation, correct? So
Actually, well, in the site plan it says the second floor, but I think it is a split level, so it's not
yeah.
a true second story, which actually was, I was also raised in a split level, but mine was on the bottom floor, so it was kind of funny. Anyway, but I still reviewed this with no bias at all and stuck to the code, but just, yeah.
All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Halsted,
Yes.
Commissioner McIntyre,
Yes.
Commission Chair Fikes,
Yes.
Commissioner Askin,
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg,
Yes.
Commission Chair Tweet,
Yes.
Commissioner Springer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, takes us down to item I, pending items. We have none. J, reports. J1 is City Council. Councilman Malloy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair Twait. City Council met on September 18th, and we had introduced on the consent agenda ordinance number 3089-2019, amending Kenai Municipal Code, Section 1423 330, Standards for Commercial Marijuana Establishments, to incorporate limitations on hours of operation for retail marijuana establishments. And so this was the introduction of the ordinance that you recommended that council move forward with. And because it was the city clerk's opinion that because it's the same as what you recommended, that it did not have to be sent back to you for a public hearing. So you won't see it again. But because we do allow public comment on items on the consent agenda, there was 3 public comments on it. Ron Isaacs commented and pretty much consistent with his public comment in front of the commission. He brought up that Seward closes at the same time as the bars, 5 a.m. Their commercial marijuana, and that Homer also has 5 a.m. closure for both CME and bars, alcohol. So he's opposed to that. One of his main points is that he'd like to be able to be open, especially during July, during the dip net fishery season. Consistent to what he had told you. Ryan Tunseth, who's another retail operator, also commented. He said that he did not have any desire to be open at 2 a.m. He said that his business is usually not open after 10 p.m. Because business drops off substantially and it's not worth it to him to be open. Aside from that, he really didn't have an opinion. And then there was Ms. Coates. She's her business. It does. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a manufacturer. They do concentrates and additives. She was saying that she was not in favor of the hours of operation limitation, and saying that for her rationale kind of had to do with people that are shift workers and get off at odd hours and might need pain relief. Basically, was her argument. So we're going to have a public hearing on it at our next meeting, our first meeting in October, and then we'll see what happens. And then we have other items on our agenda that have been in front of you that we're going to be taking up at our next meeting. The ordinance on adult businesses that you just had your public hearing on, a major recommendation. And then also ordinance number 3072019. That's the one that repeals old code and puts in new code on city-owned lands for leasing and sales. So that'll be up for a public hearing again, and any final proposed amendments at our next meeting. And that was pretty much the items that relate to your business that were on our agenda. Aside from that, we did the normal things like approving assignment of leases and approving election workers and money and things like that. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Item J2, Borough Planning, Vice Chair Fikes.
Alrighty, let's see, we had a meeting Monday, September 23rd in the Borough Chambers, and everybody was present. The Plat Committee met, all the plats were discussed and approved, and then we moved on to discussing the comp plan, and they decided to postpone that for some more discussion. And then we had an issue about the material gravel site permit ordinance that we were trying to resolve. And we had asked for a work session with the assembly, and they shot us down and said, no, we can go back and work with the material work site committee, but they weren't interested in having a work session. So That was also postponed, and then, let's see. I believe that was the majority of the evening was spent on the, discussing the changes to the permit as it was written, and deciding to postpone it until supposedly after the elections is what everybody was saying. Oh, and then they had a, resolution to discuss some changes to borough code for a, security and gated community. And, Kenai and Soldotna cities both asked for additional time to go over the, changes in pursuant policy. And so they agreed to postpone those as well. And then we had a, resolution for the Fritz Creek area in Homer. They were looking to do a local option zoning, and the borough offers that, and it was, discussed and reviewed, and they met the criteria. And although all of us agreed that it was a tool that was being used, which much is discussed at our training sessions, that it comes out that people seem to bring out that tool of the local option zoning when they get irritated about something. And basically what it was is there was a property inside this neighborhood that had gone in disrepair and ended up on the auction block, and of course a developer came along and he had plans to do something, and the neighborhood didn't quite go along with those plans, and so that all resulted in this proposal for the local option zoning. And again, the tools at the disposal of the borough were limited to basically did it meet the criteria, and it did, and so we moved it on to the assembly for their stamp of approval or the rejection, and so that was all of the business that we had for the evening.
Nice to be out early, maybe, huh?
Yeah, I was surprised with the material site thing. Like I say, they kind of shot us in the foot when they said they just didn't want to have anything to do with it. I'm gonna go with it had something to do with the elections are around the corner.
All right, any questions? Thank you. Item J3, administration. Ms. Appleby.
So our next meeting is October 9th. There are 5 weeks in October, so I wanted to propose to the commission to move the October 23rd meeting to the next week, so that would be October 30th. And I guess, are there any commissioners who would not be able to attend if that meeting was moved out to October 30th? There would still be then 2 weeks between that meeting and the next one.
I won't be here for that
Okay.
one, because I will be gone that week.
Okay, anyone else?
I would be gone on the 23rd, so,
Okay. All right, well, I will go ahead and move that meeting because it sounds like we'll still have a quorum on October 30th. And I also, the consultant I've been talking to who's working on our hazard mitigation plan, she'll be present. Also possibly someone from the state office that deals with hazard mitigation plans may also be in attendance that evening. So that works out well then to move the meeting to October 30th. So I'll go ahead and do that and change it on the city's website, and then the October 9th meeting is the same, and it'll say then that the next meeting is October 30th. That's the main thing I wanted to just make sure I talked about with the commission tonight. Council liaison Malloy had mentioned several things this commission had worked on that will be before city council next week. And then I guess I should also mention, last night I attended the Kenai Peninsula Borough meeting for Alaska LNG. The city will be, it's before the city council to submit a letter supporting the project, and then just a few comments on the draft EIS. The comment deadline is October 3rd. There are some requests for an extension, so it could possibly be extended, but currently it's still October 3rd. And then the lands code change that's before city council, that was before this commission, if that goes through, it would change the lands code, and then there would also be a new form. And our outside person, our lands assistant has been still finishing going through her review of the parcels, and then we've been working them up the chain in order to get them ready for an internal review. So we're still a few months out, but it's I guess just a reminder, the lands code change isn't the end of the review of city lands, that there still will be this land management planned in the near future. And that's the end of my staff report.
I have a question for you, and I don't know, maybe Councilman Malloy, and maybe it was talked at the last meeting, I wasn't here at, but where are we at with the appeal on the last marijuana place up there at the old Moose Lodge?
So the Board of Adjustments set a hearing for October 7th.
Okay.
So there's a hearing scheduled, and then they have 30 days after the hearing to issue a written decision.
Okay, great, thank you. Anything else for Ms. Appleby? All right, we will move on. Nobody in the audience. I don't think we have any additional public comment. Item L, informational items, we have none. We just talked about our next meeting. Takes us to item N, commissioners' comments and questions. Commissioner Askin.
I don't have anything.
Commissioner McIntyre.
Nothing.
Commissioner Halsted.
Nothing, thank you.
Commissioner Greenberg.
You have a question on, when that gunsmith came to us, first, it was bundled with another change to the land use table. I don't remember hearing that this one got approved. What happened to the other one? The other land use change?
So I think you're referring to the RR1 code
Yeah.
changes. Yeah.
It
So
was the professional buildings.
yeah. So I actually would need to look back to. It was so in my mind when it was happening.
So both code changes were approved.
Okay. Yeah. And this person could only bring his permit application because it was now a conditional use. Before that, it was not allowed in the zone, in the RR1 zone.
Commissioner Springer.
I've got to apologize to staff for putting them on the spot with the inspection process on that one. The point being is that it was inspected, and that was important that it was done. So anyway, I apologize for that.
Vice Chair Fikes. All right, and I have nothing to add as well. So with that, the meeting is adjourned. Hey, Gary, I think you